I suppose we should start off with why now, right? Why wait until now to read the most famous story of all time, potentially? Or, phrased another way, why have I not read it until now? I mean, good God, I've read Ulysses before this book. I read Ulysses over a decade before this book, and what gives? One of the reasons I never read it until now is simply that it was not on the curriculum. I was not made to read it until now. I did read the Iliad. I read portions of the Iliad in a world literature class in college, in my undergrad. I was raised on various incarnations of the Odyssey. I feel like there are a million different cartoons and just a couple different, renditions of it. Of course, you remember the Hercules TV show? I remember that episode. The Simpsons definitely had a mini episode of it. I'm sure Hysteria did something on it. There was I feel like I saw at least one or two different those 80s cartoons that, the ones. And there was the Wishbone episode. You guys remember Wishbone? There was that 1997, it was a really long-ass movie version of the Odyssey, and it had, this kind of, brunette Fabio Italian guy. It was really bad acting and some really strange, green screen. Production quality was low on it, but there was a full movie of it, so I remember watching that. I got the myth by osmosis, I suppose you could say. I knew what the story was already, and so I guess I've been taking it for granted. The other big reason was that I probably just wanted to get myself a nice copy of it. This is the Franklin Library edition that I got. I've mentioned this bookstore before, but if you're ever in Long Beach, technically Signal Hill, if you're ever in Long Beach, you should go to Planet Books. That's the place, that's the bookstore to go to, except everything else is second. Also, shout out Page Against the Machine, my favorite leftist bookstore. But yeah, Planet Books, they have a ton of Franklin Library and what is it, Easton Library? Those are the other really nice leather-bound hardcovers. So I bought those as a Christmas gift for myself. It came as a pair, both the Iliad and the Odyssey. So I had bought it recently. That was probably the real impetus of it. I did not really care what translation I got. This is the Robert Fitzgerald translation. My understanding is that it's the Robert Fagles, I think, is the popular one that most shows up in different curricula. The Fitzgerald one is a little more elevated and a little more florid. It was perfect for me, I think. It was sort of perfect for just the tone of what I wanted. I didn't want anything too dumbed down. I've heard good things about, I forget the translator, but it was the first woman translator. I saw a couple people talking about that recently, of how it was really good and accessible. But I liked this one because it had a little bit of a kind of elevated, it's definitely more of a British, I would say, translation. It also, I can understand why it wouldn't be used in schools because, the K's are C's, right? It it's spelled Cyclops. What is that? It's Cyclops, man. Or how is Circe? Is Circe spelled like Kirky or something? It looks like that. Okay, but that's kind of the only strange thing I would say about, or the only out of ordinary thing about this translation. I did do some pre-reading for this. I also watched or listened to a lot of lectures, either very intentionally or kind of in the background or as sleep or as I was waking up. But the one bit of pre-reading that I can say that I did for this was 1177 BC. I think I think the subtitle is something like The Year Civilization Ended. It's by Eric Klein. It's a fairly recent archaeological history about the Bronze Age collapse. And the city of Troy and the tales of the Odyssey and Iliad loom large into this book. I read it, maybe a month before I read this, and that gave me a good grounding for this. Because the Bronze Age collapse was kind of the original polycrisis, to use Adam Tooze-ism. It was a time of geopolitical upheaval that was marked by the destructions of international trade networks amidst ongoing famine, war, disease, changes to the climate. Remind you of anything? And it's very interesting to try and just start looking at the ways in which this might have upended or created cultural memory. One of the big ways that I kept coming back to was like the Hesiod periodization, how it goes from like gold, silver, bronze, heroic, and then iron. And I kind of gave me two thoughts about this. One, how this is like the opposite of our current sort of, myth of liberal progress that our civilization is, or certainly American society has been living under. Though it feels like our two civilizations are maybe emotionally reaching a similar point. And then number two, how that situates both the audience and the author. That, they all kind of believe that they are coming from a fallen age, a degraded, or you might even say degenerate people. And that probably tells us something about what these people saw and understood about their world. Maybe that's more of a world that we're heading toward. You can see in, one of my favorite scenes, one of my favorite books is The Gathering of the Shades, when Odysseus is retelling the story of how he went down into Hades, and the difference that Odysseus sees in himself and Achilles. Achilles is a warrior. He's a great and powerful man who slew countless people on the battlefield, and meanwhile, as we've seen in Odysseus' own telling, he's this hero that's constantly trying to find shortcuts. He's trying to scam the gods or fate in a lot of ways, and can't help but feel like that's a little resonant to now. Like, to a more extreme way, there's something that just rings true about, I don't know, you look at the world, at the people that are supposedly, I don't know, heroic, or the people that we look up to or that occupy the high places in society, and it feels like it's full of scammers. It's full of grifters. It's full of people who are, they're all sell job. They're all hubris. It's the Silicon Valley tech bro that's like constantly overhyping his new little stupid computer doodad. And then, you could go down the line to maybe like manosphere influencers, and it's all a bunch of toxic over-exaggeration and guys selling you on the idea that the system's corrupt, so you have to scam the corrupt system. In Odysseus's defense, though, I will say he has a lot of genuine heroic qualities that are missing from some of these people that I'm thinking about. Odysseus is a scoundrel, but not without honor. I think we can all agree. What do I admire most about him? That he's patient. He's long-suffering. That's kind of one of the more surprising things about the book, is that the second half is just like Odysseus plotting and scheming. He's like literally on Ithaca, and it's all just like, wait, not yet. Wait, not yet. Let me talk to this guy. Wait, not yet. The second half of the book is an exercise in delayed gratification. And look, I am as guilty as anyone else watching this video about forgetting that value in my own life, about wanting to forego that experience because it's too uncomfortable to just like sit and wait and be patient. It's a culture of wanting to get rich quick or to immediately like fire back on your timeline. But can we stand to patiently wait on the shoreline as a prisoner of our dreams of escape? This is the question in front of us. Can we weather the storm? Can we find ropes strong enough to tie us to the mast while every inch of us wants to leap out and jump on the rocks of our own destruction? I'm constantly daydreaming of action and retaliatory violence these days. You could say that sitting still has never felt more impossible than now.
Agents swarmed into at least 3 locations looking for suspected immigration law violators. The blowback was fast and fierce, with some protesters jumping in front of law enforcement vehicles to prevent them from moving.
Waymo is steering clear of downtown LA until further notice after 5 of its driverless cars were destroyed during the ICE protests.
As far as my favorite parts go, I mean, this is an episodic tale, so we're all going to return to our favorite episodes, as I do with Ulysses. I would say my first favorite, as I kind of mentioned already, was The Gathering of the Shades. And one of the big reasons why I liked this was that I have never really seen a satisfying rendition of this scene in kind of any of the aforementioned media that I, grew up on. So this did feel fresher. It had that aspect to it. Also, maybe a little bit of an aspirational chapter in my life. I really want to believe I'm in hell right now because that implies a coming resurrection. That implies my life still hews to mythological constants. This scene felt the most kind of mythological to me. It felt like it held the sort of fullness of the wider, Greek world. Obviously, we're going and seeing, other characters from both the Iliad, but also just Odysseus's further life. And it kind of shows us the wider universe of what's going on. And for me, the crescendo is in that exchange that Odysseus has with Achilles. Obviously, he's seeing, his mother down there. He's going down there to seek Tiresias's counsel in prophecy. And I'll just read part of the exchange here. And this is Odysseus talking. I have not yet coasted Acadia, not yet touched my land. My life is all adversity. But was there ever a man more blessed by fortune than you, Achilles? Can there ever be? We ranked you with immortals in your lifetime, we Argives did. And here your power is royal among the dead men's shades. Think then, Achilles, you need not be so pained by death. To this he answered swiftly, Let me hear no smooth talk of death from you, Odysseus, light of counsels. Better, I say, to break sod as a farmhand for some poor country man on iron rations than lord it over all the exhausted dead. And obviously that's a line that's echoed in other mythological epic poems, which I will probably be reading later this year, Paradise Lost by John Milton. But even just taking this scene on its own terms, I mean, that right there, that's the real death of Achilles, if you ask me. That resignation, he doesn't get the glory that he won with his death. He doesn't feel it. It's less than ash in his mouth. He doesn't even have a mouth. He doesn't get to feel it. He'd rather just be a fucking farmhand. That's real bitterness. That's real defeat. Probably my other favorite episode is the episode that kind of took the whole book to get to, which was the slaying of the suitors. I guess this is kind of a combination of books 21 and 22. Why did I like it so much? Because you realize you've been waiting the entire book for this, and it's satisfying. It's the delayed gratification that finally, it's the longed for tidal wave of justice that finally sweeps through, as embodied by Odysseus himself. He gets to embody the justice in his household. And there's just such pleasure of seeing these fools get absolutely yeeted. And it's a reminder of, the Iliad, right? That's a book in which the specificity of death is everywhere. It's, markedly famous for that. And the specificity of death is kind of missing a lot. It's just not as important, battle scenes are not as important to this book. But when you get to it in this scene, you're getting very specific details. It's telling you exactly where the spear is being thrown and where it's landing in the suitors' bodies. And again, it's just a reminder of how much that's been held back for the whole book. And the way it explodes as an event off the page makes you appreciate the plotting, scheming even more. And I will say, the schemes in this book, not that smart, right? Like, there's literally twice when Odysseus is back, right, and he's pretending to be the beggar, and everyone's, taking him for the fool, he's like literally makes two very heavy-handed prophecies that Odysseus will come back. He's gonna come back and bring honor to this household. I don't know why the bum is like a Bernie Sanders voice, but spiritually, I think that's that's how Homer would want me to read this, right? But it doesn't matter because we're so starved of action. We've gotten so used to waiting that we forget how powerful justice can feel. Also, as a side note, another little favorite description. There was, while we're talking about the specificity of death, or I guess the specificity of injury, I really liked the extended that Homeric is it a Homeric metaphor, Homeric simile, whatever, of when he blinds the Cyclops, when he blinds Polyphemus. So I want to read from that because he's retelling the story to who is he retelling it to? Whoever he's the Alcinous and his people. And he has like a long spear, a big handspike, and he says, "I drew it from the coals, and my four fellows gave me a hand, lugging it near the Cyclops as more than natural force nerved them. Straight forward they sprinted, lifted it, and rammed it deep in his crater eye, and I leaned on it, turning it as a shipwright turns a drill in planking, having men below to swing the two-handled strap that spins it in the groove. So with our brand we bored the great eye socket, while blood ran out around the red-hot bar. Eyelid and lash were seared, the pierced ball hissed broiling, and the roots popped. In a smithy, one sees a white-hot axe head or odds, plunged and wrung in a cold tub, screeching steam, the way they make soft iron hale and hard. Just so, that eyeball hissed around the spike." Talk about violence. Ooh, isn't that pleasing? I also liked this chapter at the slaying of the suitors, not the Cyclops chapter, or the Cyclops retelling, because it also feels a little bit aspirational. I would also like to kill a bunch of people and return honor to my household and country.
Firing rubber bullets at protesters, moving them on through the heart of LA. You just shut the
Continue to support peaceful protests and enforce the law when criminal acts occur in the neighborhood in Los Angeles with integrity. Let me open it up now for any questions you might have or any points that we can clarify.
Chief needed to activate those National Guard troops to take control of this.
One of the more meta things about reading the Odyssey is you're reminded. I am a little surprised I didn't think about Ulysses more and about the parallels, but I just didn't. But what I was thinking about was how just generally this book is such a creative fuel for so many other writers and artists. And, don't want to speak too soon, but I feel like I felt the beginnings of a new creative project stir in me. And I can talk about a little bit about that. I did some deeper research into my family history and the specific parts of history that they were involved in, that he was involved in. We'll see if it ever becomes an actual thing. My grandfather, he was in the Merchant Marines in World War II, so he was his own Odyssean man. The Merchant Marines, they're now part of the Coast Guard, but they were basically like the cargo ships for for the war. And I never knew the man. Okay, I only have the stories that my dad has told, and my dad got very few stories because apparently it was a really rough go of it. I mean, it was World War II. He was fighting Nazis. And the famous story I got of, the Jeeps, vodka, and Spam, they basically were snowed in Russia on a trip up there during one winter, and they only had the vodka and Spam to survive on. My grandfather's job was being the cook. And cooking and dining is one of the major signs of civilization, both in this book and also just kind of in mythology the world over. And oh boy, if that isn't narratively rich to explore. And so I sent in basically for his discharge papers because we just didn't know that much about him, and it involves a little bit of annoying bureaucratic paperwork, but my job involves a lot of annoying bureaucratic paperwork, so I took it upon myself to send in and get his discharge papers, and I was able to kind of cross-reference with another database that I found online, and I learned some pretty wild details about him, especially the Russia stuff, but he went all over the world. Just literally, Murmansk, Russia, Marseille, France, Gibraltar, Panama, the Philippines. Literally, like both theaters, both Europe and the Pacific theater. But on the Russia stuff, I found out that he shipped out from Lockhew, Scotland, December 30th, 1944, and he arrived about 8 days later in Murmansk, and then he was in Russia for another month and a half before he shipped back out on February 17. And I read a narrative. I was able to find like the flotilla number, whatever. I don't think it's called a flotilla. But the convoy is what it's called. I was able to find out what convoy he was in. And that convoy, when they shipped out on February 17th, encountered like 70 to 90 mile per hour, like hurricane gale force winds. And so for the first 3 days, they literally got blown back into port. Very Odyssean. And then when that died down, they set out, and they were basically under fire from the very last German air assault of the war on the North Sea convoys, on that specific set of convoys, because the Germans were like literally running out of gas then at that point. But one of the stories that my dad tells me that his dad told him in like a rare moment of vulnerability was how my grandfather was manning the guns. Again, he's a cook, but I guess he was called upon to man the gun at one point. The merchant marines were outfitted with, I think, some basic guns. And he was manning the gun while simultaneously giving a blood transfusion to one of the guys on board. Which is an intense thing. And you can look up other stories of merchant marines talking about their experience. And, like one of the just hellish things that they had to go through was when they were not on deck, but when they were below deck, they were often subject to like depth charges being exploded around them. That could have been probably dropped from planes. And one guy describes it as feeling like you had, a tin can or a pail on your head and someone banging it with a hammer. And you can just imagine the horrifying like echoes, like they're in an icy cold sea, okay? The North Sea in fucking winter 1945. And it's one of the most sort of brutal passages you can go through as a merchant marine. And I mean, fuck me if I didn't start seeing ghosts if I had gone through that. And my grandfather, known to be a scoundrel, I won't go into much detail, but not necessarily full of honor, but, listen, you shot at Nazis, that's an honorable enough thing for me to respect you. I can work around the rest of the stuff, even if maybe you didn't have racial attitudes that were as perfect as mine, I guess. But I don't know. There are some parallels, I think, with the Trojan War and World War II and what those victories meant for the victors and the stories the victors told themselves. And in the midst of the breakup of the post-World War II order, It's hard not to look back at the mythological foundations of your world with a renewed sense of wonder and discovery. I've also just been thinking about heroes and what's heroic more broadly lately, like in a cultural kind of way. What even is heroic in this society? Because we are going to find the fuck out, aren't we? I mean, I learned my mythology from children's cartoons. Should I really be surprised that I have such a cartoonish president? My grandfather, as I said, had plenty of flaws, like Odysseus. And he and my dad had a contentious relationship. But even then, I think my dad tries to look past the worst parts of him and set aside the honorable parts and make sure to pass those honorable parts on to me while noting the critiques. And Lord knows I have critiques of my own father. But I will also be sure to pass on the praise I have for him. What a time to be alive. What a time to be looking for heroes, right? Thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, I'm going to set up a Ko-Fi, just like a little tip jar. Couple of creators that I really like, that's the way they do it. I do not have the sort of, capacity to do a full Patreon. So if you want to leave me a tip, I have a tip jar now. Go to the Ko-Fi link below. Let's keep going, kids. Let's see how weird it gets.